Right, so in a plot twist that was so obvious I managed to not see it coming, episode 7 of the Amazing Digital Circus ended with the revelation that Abel was in fact lying to the characters about there being an exit. It is then only natural to question how much more of what he said was completely made up, and what might be actually grounded in reality, namely, the reason he provides for the circus actually existing. So today, my plan is to go over everything that Abel tells us in episode 7, see how much is valid, spoiler alert, it's very little, and then we will figure out why the circus was really created in the first place. Let's get into it. First off, I'm going to clarify something before the comments get spammed with it. I've talked pretty extensively on this channel about the Soma theory already. Getting its name from a game of the same title, the Soma theory is the idea that the real minds of the characters aren't stuck in the circus at all, but rather versions of their consciousness have been uploaded into the game, leaving the real people to continue on with their lives being none the wiser. For us to actually be able to pull anything of use out of this episode, this theory cannot be true, so while it's not actually been disproven, for the sake of this video we're just going to say that it's false and that these are the only instances of the character's consciousness that exist. Now, to properly figure out CNA's goal here, we need to go over all of the different claims that Abel has been making. So I went back and rewatched this episode for the first time in 2 months and found about a dozen instances where Abel actually says or does something testable. He's not actually an NPC, he's a human. This is obviously entirely false, but it is the basis of the rest of the adventure that the characters at least somewhat believe it. Nothing too interesting here. I don't know if I'm ready to face Kinga again after what happened. This is an incredibly odd line that doesn't fit very well with the rest of Kane's supposed plot for this adventure, so we'll put a pin in it and circle round like a tired middle manager. I'm one of the original programmers working on the circus. Kinga was one of my co-workers. This is a half-truth in the most literal sense. Abel here was obviously not an original programmer because he isn't real, but the idea that Kinga was one has some merit to it. Episode 3's sort of janky inclusion of the fact that Kinga was a computer scientist before being transferred to the circus pretty much sealed the deal that he worked on creating this place. It is slightly odd that in all of his lucid moments so far we haven't seen Kinga talk about the creation of the circus much at all, but that can be attributed to him likely focusing more on saving the mental state of whichever character he's with at the time. The higher-ups began forcefully hooking workers up to the computer. This one is actually probable. We have clear evidence of there being plenty of other characters that entered the circus around the same time or later than Kinga, including people like Scratch and his wife. Forbes suggests that up to 43% of people meet their spouse at work, so the idea that Queenie was also a CNA employee isn't that far-fetched. CNA was planning on expanding development, which is how the current cast arrived. Again, we're going to put a pin in this one. Kane is an AI designed to keep your mind active, but is just as much of a prisoner as them. The latter half of this point is just Kane trying to garner some sympathy from the characters because he wants them to feel more attached to him, but the first part is more interesting. If Kane was indeed designed specifically to keep the minds of the adult cast that have found their way into the circus engaged, then why is there this ban on swearing? Kane seems to believe, at least in the pilot, that the circus is made for people of all ages, but there have only ever been adults in the circus so far. The current cast are all adults, and we can assume that the previous employees of CNA were too. Perhaps this is just a lie that the real people at CNA told Kane. Possibly, but it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for that to be the case either. Having this lie instilled into Kane that he's supposed to make the circus safe for all ages doesn't actually accomplish anything if it's not true. The stasis pods keeping the real-life versions of the characters alive are linked to the same software as the digital world. This stacks a couple of theories on top of each other. Number 1, the bodies are being kept in stasis to keep the minds alive, and 2, the necessary software to keep a human body alive is at all similar to the software needed to run a simulation game. I really doubt that the latter part of this is strictly true. I've been watching you, all of you. Okay, can I be honest for a second? This scene is the reason I've been wanting to make this video for a while now, because it is so fun to me the way it's done. It's like something out of Knives Out, which is my favourite movie, and I absolutely love it. Here we see Gangle with her sketchpad, but instead of the normal anime drawings, there are notes and bees from Kane's therapy session with Zubul in episode 3. Zubul and a sober Ragatha are bringing Gangle back to the group instead of it just being Zubul at the end of episode 4, and Zubul isn't here during Kaufmo's funeral at the end of the pilot. They are tiny details that pretty much everyone during their first watch of the episode would have missed, but the way they communicate to the audience, both the fact that this isn't a real character with real memories, but also Kane's personal disliking of Zubul specifically, is fantastic. So no, he wasn't watching them. Kane only had partial knowledge of what was going on, so he filled in the blanks like any other AI program. I'm not a creation of Kane. Absolute bollocks. I would love to work alongside him again, it's just I made a promise. Again, bollocks, but this ties back into that other comment we put a pin in before, and that sucker is staying puckered until we're done here. Kinga has a lot of wisdom when he uses it responsibly. Again, something strange is up here, and it makes very little sense to be included. Why even make this comment at all? And that is the last thing of any consequence that Abel says before the truth is revealed to us, which leaves 3 quotes regarding Kinga's involvement in the circus development and 1 other quote. Now let's take a look at the actual purpose of this video, the reasons why the circus could have been created. Number 1. A cruel experiment. Kinga has definitely had a serious amount of involvement with the development of the Amazing Digital Circus, but even he seems to have very little knowledge of what that development actually entailed. Combining that with this quote from Abel,
"Yeah, when he uses it responsibly,"
there seems to be a lingering idea here that Kinga was reckless with his development of the game and the potential consequences of that development. The first possibility for the reason behind the circus's creation follows most closely to what Abel says. A group of programmers, including Kinga, made a game that traps people inside of it and places their bodies in a comatose state that is easy to store and to monitor. Kinga willingly participated in the design of this circus, knowing what it would do and even playing a big hand in the design of Kane's AI, adding his need to be liked by humans and his ability to feel sadness and other emotions similar to it. Kane, and subsequently Abel, dislike Kinga for this and see it as him using his abilities irresponsibly, but because of that very same code, Kane is not able to harm Kinga in any way. But of course, the real villains here are the executives. Once the game was mostly finished, the developers of it were quickly hooked up to prevent any loose ends from exposing what was going on. The circus is now constantly used to experiment on human minds for corporate benefit, and there is no way to leave without the company shutting down, which it won't that it has access to this incredible exclusive research technology. Reason number 2. Abandoned innocence. That first theory misses out on one important detail, however, and that is how the current cast members got access to the circus. Shoving in employees who work in the office is one thing, but a random tattoo artist, a country girl running from her parents who sells houses for a living, and a Macca's shift manager aren't typically the correct clientele for a business with a speciality in information technology. What all of these people are prone to, however, is wandering into old abandoned buildings looking for interesting things and potential opportunities. In this scenario, the circus was built not as a malicious device to trap people, but as a real virtual reality game to be enjoyed by lots of people, including the children that we mentioned before. Kinga, as a programmer on the game, was also chosen to be one of the first people who would playtest the server and see if it could handle multiple characters at once, but obviously he got sucked in. His mind permanently transferred to the game and his body left in a vegetative state along with the others. Once this happened, CNA were inundated with lawsuits and were forced to close down, abandoning the building entirely. This was also when Kane was cut off from the outside world, which is why all of his photos show a pristine office building. Through some error, the power to the building was left on, even as everyone left it to rot. Only a few PCs were left operating, so any power lost would likely be minimal enough that the lazy electricity company wouldn't notice. From that point on, urban explorers like Zubel and Pomni, a curious real estate agent looking for new properties in Ragatha, and people simply looking to run from their problems like Jackson Gangle would find their way into the building, put on one of the headsets scattered around the place, and get transported in as well. Reason number 3. Final home. Though the first half of this video was looking at Abel's quotes about Kinga, the man himself also says something very important during the episode. In the darkness of his pillow fort, Kinga is semi-conscious of what Zubel is telling him about leaving the circus, and he is incredibly confused by the whole idea of it, stating that it isn't possible. This was my initial proof behind the Sonar theory I mentioned before, where Kinga knew it was impossible to escape because there was no body for him to return to. Now that we know this isn't the case though, we must adopt a new meaning for this line. In what may be soon overtaken as the most popular video on my channel regarding the mental conditions of each member of the cast, I talked about Kinga having repeated moments that seem similar to terminal lucidity, a condition of dementia whereby people who are close to death regain much of their lost memory and function. In that video, my rationale for why this keeps happening is because the circus is sustaining him and not allowing him to die, and I think that can be expanded on here. It is possible that the Amazing Digital Circus is a way to keep the minds of the terminally ill active so they don't die. People with life-threatening injury or are otherwise near death are hooked up to the machine and sustained digitally to prevent them from dying. One could argue that this is perhaps a fate worse than death, but the loved ones on the outside looking in during these situations often don't see it that way. Kinga knows that this has happened to both him and his wife because he built it for this specific reason. The meaning behind him saying that there is no way to leave the digital circus is he knows that if you do, then you're dead. And those are my 3 most likely theories as to why the digital circus was created in the first place. But that's all I've got for today. Thank you all for watching, and have a good one.